We're on to week 12 of the NFL season. I'm Nick Whalen. He's John McKechnie from RotoWire.com. We are here once again to give you our best bets of the week. John, we got a doozy of a week 12 slate coming our way. We're recording this as usual on Thursday afternoon. So we start the week with Bills Texans tonight. Won't talk about that game. By the time you hear this, that will be over. But even that one, I'm thinking through it right now. It's like, man, it's a little bit tricky. I feel just a little weird betting against that Houston defense, especially with the Texans at home. And it's kind of a fitting precursor, I think, for what is a very, very tricky week. I'm excited to get into some Survivor talk with you. I'm alive in a pool. I know you're still alive in one as well. I mean, this is getting down to it. I'm more of a survive and advance guy when it comes to Survivor. I don't want to script things out too far. I'm starting to pay the piper for that one because pretty much all the good teams have been used up, I know, for both of us. So we'll get into some of that later in the show. We'll get you an update on the Circus Survivor contest, what's going on there. We'll, of course, give you our favorite props of the week, a parlay. We'll give you our locks. And John, we will always give you our 3 favorite bets of the week. As usual, I'll let you lead us off. And I am glad you chose this game because, once again, if you've been following us this season, every single week I have a game that's a total stay away for me, and you love a side in that game. So let's keep that tradition going, John. Arizona +3 against the Jags.
I do like them, and I am sorry to be betting against your guys here, but I think as a Jags fan, like, you are very honest and transparent about this team, and they are about as unpredictable as it gets. I mean, they are such a roller coaster. I think if you take it back to the week after they beat the Chiefs, they lost to the Seahawks by 8. That's reasonable. You lose to the Rams by a lot. You barely squeak by the Raiders in overtime, and you let them score 29 points. You lose to the Texans with Davis Mills in that crazy comeback, and then you paced the Chargers. Who are you? Like, who are these guys, the Jacksonville Jaguars? They go out to Arizona, and I think your knee-jerk reaction would be, of course, they are just going to do that again. But I think the line is kind of instructive here. I think most of us in our mind's eye would have imagined that the Jags would have been at least 3.5, 4, maybe even 4.5 point favorites going on the road against an Arizona team that has given up over 40 points in each of the last 2 weeks. Not the case. Fairly tight spread here. There's some 2.5s bouncing around out there, but I like Arizona +3. It gives me a little bit more comfort there with the field goal, giving me the push at the very least. But this is a very difficult game. I think that these are two teams that are still searching for their identity in week 12. But I do feel like the Cardinals, I can excuse their performance in division, but generally outside of the division, they've been a pretty dangerous team this year, especially as underdogs, as they usually are. So I think that we're going to see Arizona really test this Jacksonville secondary a lot. I know there's not going to be Marvin Harrison. That didn't really seem to matter last week as Jacoby Brissett set the single game record for completions. So ultimately, I just don't think that Jacksonville is able to replicate what they did last week against the Chargers. And ultimately, we see like yet another flow to the ebbs of this Jags season. They let down a little bit here. Keep it close with Arizona. I like Arizona and the points.
The Harrison thing is so tough for me, not because I love Marvin Harrison, but because there's just such a drop off from him to the next set of weapons in that wide receiver room. Obviously it just means we see more of Trey McBride, which has been the case over these last couple of weeks. But I didn't think I'd be saying that at any point this year. Like, man, not having Marvin Harrison, that's really hanging in the back of my mind. I think you're reading this game correctly. Jacksonville, I love fading a team coming off of its best case scenario game of the entire season. Like, if you watched this last week, I love the Chargers there. We acknowledge, missing Joe Alt, missing Rashawn Slater, that matters, but the Jags have been getting no pass rush. They end up knocking Justin Herbert out of the game, right? It's like there's no possible way that they're going to play as well as they did last week. I mean, that was one of the best defensive performances any team has had this season. I think it was the 4th lowest yards per play allowed in any game. I mean, that was dominant, right? The Chargers didn't even get to 150 yards of total offense. So, maybe you caught LA at the right time. That game was at home. I will say, John, after we recorded that video, like right after, I watched a video where Tony Baselli, who's now a member of the Jags front office, called it the biggest game in Jaguars history. And I was like, oh no, they're going to come out. They're going to come out and win this game. This was a terrible donkey pick by me. And that did turn out to be the case. But I would not be surprised if we see a letdown here. I think those last 2 games for Arizona. Yeah, they got blown out. Yeah, they allowed a ton of points. A little misleading, right? You had all the crazy turnovers early on against Seattle. You had 3 more last week against San Francisco. Like they dug themselves a hole that they couldn't get out of. But over and over, like they were at least threatening, right? I mean, like you said, Jacoby Brissett completed 47 passes last week. So this one is still a stay away for me just because of how unpredictable the Jaguars are. Jags are also pretty banged up, by the way. So that's something that's kind of lingering for me going into this game. But if I had to take a side, it would be Arizona, because I don't think the version of the Jags that we saw last week is really indicative of who this team is going to be going forward. All right, I'm going to start off with a total for my first play, and just a lot of variety in the totals markets this week. We got plenty of games hanging around in the 30s. I know that Raiders Browns is down to 36 at some shops right now, but I still think we are getting a pretty reasonable number. Excuse me. I still have just no voice whatsoever. That's been the case for a week and a half now. 39.5 in Saints Falcons. I'm going under there. I just don't really see the case for either team doing a whole lot offensively. I mean, Atlanta has just looked beyond lifeless with Kirk Cousins at quarterback this season. Not that Michael Penix has been a whole lot better, but you're also now taking Drake London out of the mix. I mean, we've seen 3 appearances from Kirk Cousins, only 1 start, but 3 games that he's played in. He is 32 of 52, which is like, all right, not that bad. 250 yards on those 32 completions. No touchdowns, 4.8 yards per attempt. The one game he did start was the Miami game, and that was when Miami was at its absolute lowest point. That's when they were the worst defense in the NFL, and they scored 10 points in that game and got blown out. Like, if you've watched any of these Kirk Cousins possessions, it's just hopeless, man. And I think, taking Drake London out of the equation makes that even worse. You got some injuries on the offensive line for Atlanta. And, this is not really me making a case for the Saints winning this game. I think they probably do. It's a total stay away for me on the side. But the Saints defense, for as bad as this team has been, has actually held up fairly well this season. 15th in EPA per play, 16th in success rate. They're not good against the pass, but I don't know if that really matters all that much in this matchup. I was surprised to find, John, the Saints defense 4th in EPA per rush on the year. So I think the obvious script, if you're Atlanta, is, don't put the ball in Kirk Cousins' hands. Let's just ride Bijan Robinson. I think that's going to be easier said than done. So I see this just being a really ugly, 16-13, 19-14, maybe a weird final score type of game. I'm going under 39.5.
Yeah, I don't think that some of the deep shots that Tyler Shough was able to land in Carolina last time that we saw him are necessarily transferable to this game. I do think that the Falcons have, at least on paper, a good defense. I know it didn't show last week against Carolina for their own part. But yeah, this coaching staff just needs to go in Atlanta. But yeah, I think that's an interesting point on the Saints run defense, because you do think the path forward for Atlanta here is to just go ahead and run the ball. And the Saints have been good against the run. And I think what's like even trickier about that is like they rate that highly, 4th in the league in EPA against the rush. When they are having to play kind of straight up, when you're playing the Falcons, like, in this particular condition with Kirk Cousins back there, like you can just absolutely stack the box almost with impunity here. So it could be a bit of a slog there for Bijan. They're going to have to maybe get him going in the passing game or something to loosen up that defense, because otherwise, if you just run right into the teeth over and over again, you're getting short possessions. You're setting the Saints up with good field position. They're off a bye too. I think all of this leads me to a low scoring game as well. So I like that call.
Yeah, I feel like this one's either we're going to know right away. It's like either going to be a dead nut under, or I'm just going to be totally wrong. And it's like, how is this 21-14 at the end of the first quarter? But I'll bet on this being an under spot. Just not a lot of firepower out there for either of these teams. All right, John, for your second game, I am so glad you put this on your card, because I cannot wait to talk about this. You got another under, and we are going to that lowest total on the board, Browns Raiders.
Yeah, I'm calling this the limbo. The bar is low, and we're going under it. The 36.5 is what we're looking at for Raiders versus Browns. There's so many reasons to like the under here, I feel like. Both offenses are abysmal. I mean, if you didn't know, looking at the Raiders last week on Monday Night Football should have been a pretty good indicator for you that even against the Cowboys, they couldn't do anything. That's bad news, because Cleveland, extremely good defensively. They lead the league defensively in EPA per rush allowed. So we're going to see more of the same as far as Ashton Genty getting hit in the backfield, being stuck in the mud. I think he rates the worst as far as yards before contact. So like the Raiders are just giving him no chance really to do anything. The Browns are also 10th best against the pass. The Raiders have a terrible offensive line. Mario Puig and I were talking about this on the Week 12 preview show. The all-time single game sack record is Derek Thomas, 7.
Yep.
I think Myles Garrett could get it here.
I didn't even think about that. I love that call. I mean, he's gotten to what, 5 already this season?
Another
5. Game of 4.
He had 3 last week. I'm certain of. I saw that. I had to sweat through that one. And so all of that is to say that I don't think the Raiders are live to score much more than like 13 points in this game. And then on the other side, you're starting Shedeur Sanders if you're the Browns. I mean, yes, like you're going to have a kind of similar script of the Falcons where it's like run first, run as much as you possibly can. But Shedeur, my suspicions about him looked correct, at least for 1 week last week in his debut. Really no feel in the pocket for the pass rush. And it changed the way that Baltimore defended the Browns because they just blitzed him and blitzed him and blitzed him. I think the Raiders probably take a page out of that playbook. You have to just heat up Sanders until he proves that he can beat the blitz. Mm-hmm. And then additionally, you got Max Crosby on the other side. So all of this tells me that really there's a chance that the most points in this game are scored via defensive touchdown than the offense getting into the end zone. It wouldn't stun me if there are 0 offensive touchdowns in this game. I'm looking at 36, and I'm wondering how we get to the over here more than anything. So under 36, that might be my best bet, period, this week.
So I am not a Dylan Gabriel guy. We've talked about that on this show. Nobody throws a more uninspiring ball than the Dylan Gabriel, especially down the field. It's like a worse version of Tua in a lot of ways. I know they're both lefty, but just the way those balls float up there. Well, as a Ravens fan, you're watching that game last week, and I know you were cautious going in, right? Because it's like they always like kill the Browns once, and then they play a really tough game, and sometimes lose to the Browns in the other game. That's just how it goes every year, regardless of like what shape each team is in. When Gabriel went out and Sanders came in, were you happy? Were you worried? What was your thought as a Ravens fan at that point?
Pure relief. I knew at that point that the Ravens could come back and get it done because that's how little faith I have in Shedeur Sanders, especially under those conditions. Having to come in mid-game without, famously no first-team reps. Can you believe it for a 5th-round rookie? He's not working in with the starters on game week. Unbelievable. But in that particular setup, especially with the Ravens defense playing the way that it has the last month or so, or certainly since the bye, I felt like that was like a nightmare scenario for Sanders. I don't think the Raiders have a great defense necessarily, but it's at least respectable, and respectable is more than enough to I think shut down this Browns game or Browns offense, especially the passing attack. So it's Judkins or nothing, I think, as far as like Browns drives are concerned.
Yeah, every year you get like a 3-0 game in the NFL. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is the one. Total stay away for me, of course, on the side. I think we'll see some intrepid survivor players on the Raiders this week, which I get. We'll cover that more in depth later. It's like if you're going to use the Raiders at any point, this would be the spot. But we'll see, man. We'll see. And we'll cover this more later as well. But there is now an entire separate Shedeur Sanders tab on DraftKings just for Shedeur Sanders props, if you're wondering. So make sure you take a look at that. Pretty much any market you could imagine is now available for Shedeur. All right, let's see where we want to go next year, John. A couple big numbers on the board. I think we have 3 games as we record this that are currently in double digits. I will say I like 2 of them, really all 3. I know you are leaning toward the Ravens to cover a big number. I'm going to take Seattle here. 13.5 on the road. I know it's not a great spot to swallow that kind of points, but double-digit favorites are 8-5 against the spread. There's only 1 straight-up loss so far for a double-digit favorite. That was, of course, the Packers a couple weeks ago against Carolina. Obviously, I don't see Seattle losing this game. We're a lot more worried about them winning it by 2 touchdowns, but I think you got the Sam Darnold disaster game out of the way, right? And still almost won that game. 61 yards in the modern NFL. That's a makeable field goal at the end. I couldn't believe that it was at that point. But the Seattle team has been incredibly resilient. They've had other games that they've won comfortably where Darnold is still turning the ball over 2, 3, 4 times. And the defense just finds ways to keep them in games. Like the way they were able to shut down the Rams in the second half, I thought was really impressive. I mean, ended up outgaining dramatically that Rams team. Seattle still put up over 400 yards of offense. I know the turnovers and field position were a part of that, but it wasn't as ugly as it looked for the first few quarters. I think you're now the way I described this on VSiN earlier, you're taking the ankle weights off. If you've ever trained with ankle weights on and you take them off, you're like, wow, I feel like I could go, throw down a windmill dunk right now. You're going from facing the Rams to facing the Tennessee Titans. I think this Titans team maybe a little, just tiny bit inflated right now. They obviously had the fluky win against Arizona. They've played a couple of teams relatively tough, the Chargers a few weeks ago, and then, probably should have won that game, honestly, against Houston last week. I'm still not buying in. I still haven't seen a ton of progress. To me, it's still like by far the worst roster in the NFL. And I don't really see this Seattle defense, which is just so elite all over the field, having a letdown game here. Like, even if Sam Darnold does come out and just has an average game, I think this could look a lot like that Houston-Tennessee game early in the season where Houston didn't really play well and still won like 26-0. I think Seattle's defense is that good. I don't think the Titans are threatening to score 20 points here. So give me Seattle minus 13.5.
Yeah, it's one of those spots where, like, if you wanted to back the Titans, you would have almost preferred the Seahawks to have won last week. But coming off the loss, getting to just correct that immediately against the Titans, yeah, this is a bad spot, I think, for Tennessee. And I still view Seattle as one of the best teams in the league. Like, last week, they played a bad game and still almost, we're right in there. I don't think they like take their eyes off the prize here. I don't think that they're taking anything for granted. And the Seahawks have been absolutely nails on the road this year. Not just this year, but just under McDaniel, generally speaking. So 13.5, you see that on the road. Usually reflexively, you're like, no. But when it's the Titans, you got to think about it, especially when a team like Seattle is coming to town. I like it.
Yeah, that's the key. It's the Titans. It's not just your normal bad team. It's a special bad team, in my opinion. And also worth noting, Seattle has just cleaned up against bad teams so far this year, right? I mean, like some of those games, the Arizona game, the Washington game, the New Orleans game, those games have been over by the end of the first quarter. And Tennessee to me has not really shown that they're like hey, we're going to put up 21 points in the second half and give you a backdoor cover here. All right, John, another big number. I alluded to it. You're looking at the Baltimore Ravens minus 13.5.
I am. And I know that last week was not an inspired showing for Baltimore's offense in particular. I thought that was one of the worst games I've ever seen Lamar Jackson play, certainly since his rookie year. But you talk about taking the ankle weights off, going against a defense with like Myles Garrett and Mason Graham and all those guys in the crummy Cleveland weather conditions to facing a Jets team that no longer has Quinnen Williams or Sauce Gardner. The ankle weights are off. I love this setup for Baltimore. I know that it used to be pretty bankable to fade the Ravens when they were favored by a big number, like by a touchdown or more. That has less so been the case here over the last year and a half, 2 years. I think Lamar Jackson has actually a pretty good record against the spread in those types of setups. If you really want to get granular, I guess theoretically Tyrod Taylor is good against the spread too, and he's got a lot of points here to work with. But I think that the big deal for me is that the Ravens defense keeps getting better and better every single week. So that limits the amount of points we can project here on the Jets side of things. And then their defense, I mean, we saw it last week, like they're still trying out there and everything like against the Patriots, but they just severely lack the talent at this point on that side of the ball to really hold up over the course of 60 minutes. So drive after drive here. I think the Baltimore is going to get rolling. It wouldn't surprise me if Baltimore gets off to a bit of a slow start offensively. That's kind of been a thing for them a little bit, but I think ultimately this game ends up looking a little bit like the Ravens game down in Miami, where maybe it's a little bit close at halftime, but ultimately Baltimore pulls away. Lamar Jackson did practice on Thursday too, if you were concerned about that. So 13.5, I like it. If it climbs any higher, maybe you think about going somewhere else, going to that Seattle game, something like that, if you're big spread hunting. But 13.5, I think, is right where you want it to be. I'm taking Baltimore laying the wood.
Yeah, I like it. And I like that comparison to the Miami game and even, what we saw from the Jets on Thursday night, where I think if you had asked me at the end of the first quarter, maybe even halftime, like, hey, do you wish you would have bet the dog? I would have been like, oh yeah, this just doesn't really feel like Baltimore has it tonight. Or, New England, had that big defensive letdown early on and, they're kind of slow playing the first half. And then by the end of it, you just kind of realize the Jets run out of gas. I will say though, I mean, we're seeing Tyrod this week, right? So all of those missed throws from Justin Fields on Thursday night, I actually thought that should have been a much closer game. Like Fields started off pretty well. They're bringing out the option. New England was clearly not ready for that. And then Justin Fields just started being Justin Fields and missing like 8-yard outs over and over. You at least expect Tyrod Taylor to make those throws, right? Like I wanted to like I like the Ravens here. I'm with you on your handicap. I like Seattle a little bit more. And the Taylor factor is the reason, because I just at least trust him to make the easy throws that Fields can't.
So he can make the easy throws. Those guys can't catch him though. Like those are going to AD Mitchell. It's not Garrett Wilson anymore. You know, like it.
Yeah,
I love it.
You got to
I
catch
love
the throw.
AD.
Yeah.
He's my guy. He caught a touchdown in every playoff game he played in at Georgia. The hands have apparently disappeared. They didn't transfer over to Sundays. So if it's him, if it's Arian Smith, who I know for a fact has bricks for hands, Tyrod can be as accurate as possible, and those guys will still find ways to put that ball on the ground. And I think that this Baltimore secondary has been kind of clamps lately. Cheeto Awuzie, what a great little free agent pickup. He's been. Nate Wiggins is really coming into his own as well, and Kyle Hamilton playing like an absolute madman. So this spells trouble, I think, for that Jets offense, even though point well taken that Tyrod better throw of the football and processor than Justin Fields.
All right, I'm gonna cop out here and just take the Detroit Lions minus 10.5. I absolutely hate stacking like two double-digit favorites here. We're on all of the big favorites. Like that, I know it's as square as it gets, but they've covered 13 in a row in this spot. I think there's a good chance we see Jackson Dart back for the Giants. My question is, what version of Jackson Dart is that? I think there are a lot of whispers that part of the reason Dable was out was the way he was using Jackson Dart, kind of doing it in reckless fashion. I understand that. At the same time, that was part of the reason the Giants were able to hang in games against superior teams. And if you're limiting that part of Jackson Dart's game, I just don't really know what else is left. He's a capable passer, but the rushing threat, you think of that, those first 2.5 quarters against the Bears, like that was Jackson Dart putting the team on his back offensively and keeping them in it. And that's also the Bears. It's not the Lions. Lions coming off the loss. We see this every single time. We passed on them a couple times in this spot, but again, 13-0 in their last 13 straight up and against the spread, coming off of a straight up loss. They're at home here. I don't really see the case for the Giants. The Lions, every single time they have one of these disaster offensive games, we see a pullback the next week. So not a lot of detail on this one for me. I'll keep that quick. I will say the other two that I was thinking about here, Panthers Niners under 49 is one that I really like. I'm staying away from the side that sitting at 7, just a bad number. I will be on San Francisco and Survivor. We'll see how that goes. I think if you're the Niners, see it again. Make Bryce Young throw for 450 yards. Let's do it, man. Your last 7 games, you were under 200. You're averaging like 145 in that span. I think we'll come out of this game and say, wow, that was a big time anomaly. What are the Falcons doing? Niners defense has obviously been terrible of late. It's been the pass defense that's been the bigger issue. The run defense is still fine. I think that's kind of what you have to focus on against Carolina. Again, force Bryce Young to beat you. And, both of these teams, they give up long drives. They go on long drives offensively. I think this could end up being somewhat of a slog. So this total to me a little bit elevated at 49. And then I did just want to pass along a trend. I don't know if I can play it as much as I refuse to back off the Chiefs. Like I hate the number at 3.5. I could totally see Kansas City losing this game, but there was an incredible trend via our friends at the Action Network. So going back last 25 years, since 2000, when you have a team at this point in the season, it's like week 10 or later, teams that are 5-5 straight up or worse, and they are favored against an elite team, that is a team with a win percentage of at least 80%, those teams, so this would fit the Chiefs in this instance, those teams are 14-0 straight up, 12-0-2 against the spread.
It's desperation time for KC. Absolutely. And, I think there's always until the culture, just like this year's Vikings, basically, like we're all going to be just kind of waiting for the shoe to drop or the horseshoe to drop at some point. And the Chiefs with like sort of no margin for error left and being at home, I think it's a good spot, or at least, a good trend to consider when at least picking that game for your pools.
Yeah. All right, so I mentioned Jags, Cardinals, Browns, Raiders. Those are my big stayaways. I'd put Steelers, Bears on there as well because I just still don't think this Bears team is good, and we don't know who the quarterback's going to be for Pittsburgh. Your biggest stayaway?
The side in Cleveland, Vegas, to me, like cannot do it, can't get there. And then my other one is the one with probably the most in-week or within the last 24, 48 hours movement. Patriots minus 6.5 now against Cincy. Joe Burrow continues to make this progress, getting listed as a full participant. I don't know if are the Bengals going to get fined if he doesn't play, a la the Ravens with Lamar Jackson a couple of weeks ago. because it seems like it's a possibility. I think more likely than not, we do see Joe Flacco again. So if you like the Patriots, maybe jump in now before Friday's injury report drops. And Burrow is out. I don't expect him to play, but weird nonetheless. Too weird for me to take the plunge here, specifically with the Bengals plus 6.5 now.
Am I weird for thinking that if I'm on the Bengals, let's say I'm holding a Bengals +7, +6.5 ticket, do I want Flacco out there? Like, do we trust Joe Burrow to step in and just be MVP candidate Joe Burrow, like a notorious slow starter Joe Burrow, without Jamar Chase?
Without Jamar Chase and coming off of 2 months missed now,
right.
And there's going to be no run game for Cincinnati because the Patriots haven't given up rushing yards to anybody except Sean Tucker this year.
Right.
So you're going to be kind of on an island. Like, I would rather Flacco than Burrow under this particular condition.
Yeah. I mean, they're 3-7, right? It's like the Burrow thing, it's like, I get it. He's a competitor, but you're not coming back to a team that in theory to me has much of a chance to make the playoffs. But yeah, certainly something to monitor as the week goes along. Let's talk a little Survivor here, and then we'll run through our props real quickly and we'll get out of here. John, not a whole lot of carnage. Week 10 was the big week where we had a bunch of entries go out on the Bills and the Panthers. Looking at the Circa contest, we had exactly 1,000 entries alive heading into week 11. Only lost 61 of those. 43 went out on Atlanta, which just continues to kill people. If you've taken Atlanta at any point, you're probably out of your survivor pool at this point. We had 11 go out on Minnesota, 6 on the Chargers, 1 on Kansas City. 44% of the field in the Circa contest was on New England, 13% on Houston, 12% on Pittsburgh, 10% on Green Bay. New England and Pittsburgh, those were pretty easy. Houston and Green Bay, you're sweating those a little bit, especially when Malik Willis came into the game. So we are now left with 939 entries in Circa Survivor, implied value creeping up close to $20,000 per entry. And just a reminder, this is a normal week 12, but Thanksgiving and Black Friday operate as their own separate mini slate next week. And then you still got Sunday, Monday as a separate week. So that means you have to have at least one of Green Bay, Detroit, KC, Dallas, Cincy, Baltimore, Chicago, Philly available if you are playing in the Circa contest. Grandissimo, the $100,000 version of Circa Survivor. All 6 remaining entries made it through. 4 of those on New England, 2 on Pittsburgh. Taking a look at the Survivor slate this week, John. I am in the Pool Genius Survivor Bowl. Was on New England last week, so we made it through. Unfortunately, lost only 1 entry. Somebody was on Atlanta, so I guess we'll take that. But the Ravens going down, John, that would have been big. I didn't want that for you. I wanted it badly for me. I think that would have brought us down to like 5 or 6 live entries. Like I said, I'm leaning toward taking the 49ers this week. Baltimore widely expected to be the most popular pick in non-Circa contests where you don't have to worry about saving them. If you have Seattle available, I think that one's obvious. Same would go for the Detroit Lions.
The Lions I'd feel least comfortable about of those big favorites just because, I don't know, I'm just such a dark guy that anything could happen. But I think Niners for me would be the move in traditional Survivor formats. Again, just kind of accounting for the likelihood that you've probably burned Seattle at some point this year in Baltimore as well. The Baltimore, with how shaky they started, maybe you use them but prior to this, or maybe use them in week 2 against the Browns when they were at home. So ultimately, Niners for me. Let's put our feet to the fire here a little bit. Like let's say that you don't have Seattle, Baltimore, San Francisco, or Detroit available. How do you go? What do you do?
I will say there are very few entries that are in that scenario, but it's a fun thought exercise. So for me personally, if I didn't have San Francisco, and I don't feel as good about this as I would like, just because of how bad that defense has been, even though I don't think Carolina's good. I think my next pick would be the Eagles, which I obviously don't like very much on the road in Dallas. Almost lost to Dallas in week 1 at home. But the Eagles also get the Raiders in week 15. And you don't want to put the cart before the horse here, but it's like that's really the spot where I want to make sure I have the Eagles available. If you want to use Vegas, this is the one time you can do it, but I know you meant you like Arizona to win straight up against Jacksonville. I would have a really hard time clicking on Arizona +3 in Survivor, but we're at that point in the year.
It is like I've just survive an advanced guy myself, like you, and that leaves me really pinched as far
Yeah.
as my options are concerned. I can't even touch the Thursday night game. I can't use the Bills against Davis Mills. So I am stuck between a
Yeah.
rock and a hard place, to the point where, yes, I am heavily considering either the underdog Cardinals or the Las Vegas Raiders, who, like I said, I have no interest in taking a side of that game. So
Yeah.
we're in dire straits here, folks. If we're still alive next Thursday, it's a miracle.
Worth noting on the Jags, by the way, if you are considering taking Jacksonville, nothing against that. I wouldn't do it personally, but they play at Tennessee next week, and they're home for the Jets in Week 15. So in theory, there are some better spots coming for the Jaguars. All right, real quickly, John, let's get through some props for the week. I did mention there is that Shedeur Sanders special tab right now out there at DraftKings. Shedeur Sanders to throw 1 interception, 1+ interception is minus 222. So that's like a 68% implied probability, which seems honestly low. 2+ interceptions is plus 164. Plus 164.
I'd be interested in that. There's
going
to
to
be.
Yeah, I want to dig in a little bit deeper on just how you think this goes for Sanders, because I think the general expectation is just, wow, he was such a disaster last week. It's like, everybody's kind of been laughing at this situation behind the scenes, and now we get to, he kind of gets to prove why he was a 5th round pick. Could you see it going the other way, though, where like everybody's jumping off of Shedeur Sanders, everybody's piling on the Raiders this week, and it's like, oh, actually, with a week of preparation, a guy who was ultimately a pretty dang good quarterback at the college level comes out, and I wouldn't say balls out, but at least plays like a slightly below average quarterback. Like that wouldn't shock me.
Well, all the Browns' offensive line has to do is just make sure that Crosby doesn't eat their lunch, and I think that things could go okay. Like Sanders, I think, has uniquely good ball placement and accuracy. If not for Awuzie last week, like he throws a game-tying touchdown against Baltimore late in the 4th quarter there. Like that was a dime that Awuzie just was able to get his hand right between, or his arm right between the hands of the intended receiver. I do have a Sanders prop, and I didn't even know about this Sanders tab over on DraftKings before we sat down, but one that I think is a gimme. Under 22.5 rushing yards. I don't know where they got this number from. He was not a runner in college. I know that like sack yardage can kind of like make the overall rushing yardage look a little bit weird from the college level, but he had over 22.5 rushing yards in just 2 games last year. And basically the way I see it is he's not like a mobile guy. He doesn't play that way. He's not extending plays looking to run. He should not, for instance, have a higher rushing total on the board than Daniel Jones, JJ McCarthy, or Drake May. I think that's ridiculous. It's just not his style. So under 22.5 might be like my best bet of the week, period, not just my best prop.
All right. I like it. I like the read on that, John. What else you got on the prop card?
Give me the Zach Charbonnet over 36.5 rushing yards at Tennessee. I think we're going to get some garbage time there. That's what we're banking on, but he has hit on this number in 3 out of his last 4. Found that one using our RotoWire player props tool. Love that. Points me in the right direction. Got another one from there that I'm really interested in. Brock Wright over 18.5 receiving yards. Very low number, but did get 7 targets last week, and I think we can take solace in the fact that Jared Goff will be more accurate in this setup against the Giants as opposed to the Eagles, with this one being at Ford Field in the Dome. A couple touchdowns for you as well. Give me George Pickens plus 160 against the Eagles. Give me AJ Barner plus 250 against the Titans. And then lastly, again, I said it a couple weeks ago, we're going to keep punishing the books for giving us 2-1 on Jackson Dart to score a touchdown until morale improves. He's plus 230 at FanDuel to score a touchdown.
All right. I like it, John. I mentioned the Sanders 2+ picks at plus 164. Just want to note that. Not saying I'm playing it, but I thought that was a pretty reasonable price. Give me Drake May over 253.5 passing yards. Give me Chase Brown over 4.5 receptions. Did just get a notification, by the way, that Joe Burrow practiced in full on Thursdays. So certainly looking like that's a real possibility. Either way, Pats have allowed the most receptions to running backs this season, 85% catch rate to the running back position. So even if they can't run, I think they try to get Chase Brown involved through the air. Give me Rashee Rice over 6.5 receptions. Give me Jerry Jeudy over 3.5 receptions plus 121. Shitter's going to complete passes to somebody. Jerry Jeudy, to me, the most likely recipient of those passes. Jatavian Sanders, my niche tight end prop of the week, over 2.5 receptions at plus 109. Niners have been a bottom 10 defense against tight ends. Hunter Henry, over 40.5 receiving yards. Don't mind an anytime touchdown for Henry either, but Cincinnati's given up 12 touchdowns to tight ends this season. They've just been horrendous against that position all year. And Quinshon Judkins, over 18.5 carries, got to 17 last week. He's gone over this number in 4 games already this season. Obviously, you don't want to expose Shitter Sanders too much in this spot. So I think we get another one of those 22, 23 carry games for Judkins. Anytime touchdowns, we're going George Kittle, Isaiah Likely at 3-1, Judkins plus 125, Tyler Algier plus 195. Going to give you a totals parlay this week, John. So we're looking at Seattle, Tennessee under 39.5, New England, Cincy over 50.5, and then that Carolina, San Francisco under 49. That is plus 487 at DraftKings. All right, man. Great stuff. Every week we say, all right, let's try to bang this out in a half hour, but just too much to discuss, man. This is going to be a really, really fun week. I cannot wait to sit down and watch these games on Thursday, on Sunday, on Monday. And we will be back next week to recap the results and give you all of our favorite plays for a very interesting slate. We got a Friday game next week, John. So we'll have to do this a little bit early, but make sure to take a look out for that over on the RotoWire YouTube channel. And John mentioned it when we were going through the props, the RotoWire picks and props tool. You can find it on our website. You can download the app. Huge, huge help. Whether you're looking to identify player props for the NFL, for hockey, for basketball, whatever you got going on this time of year, just go to rotowire.com/picks.